Hey folks, I'm Sean C. Davis, and I prepared this presentation for a small conference that is local to me and took place earlier this week. Long story short, it was a minor disaster. I never actually got to give the presentation, but it doesn't matter. In any case, I was going to record it for all of you anyways. The audience was small, it was local, and this topic is particularly interesting to me, so I wanted to talk through it and just run through it here on video today. And now, this is meant to be a lightning talk. I'll probably go a little bit longer than my allotted time because nobody's kicking me off of a stage, but I'm going to try to keep it nice and concise. We'd love your thoughts in the comments, and we can always dive in deeper to any one of these topics in a future video. I can blow it out into its own presentation if we want. But the concept here is the audience of one. And what I'm really trying to convince you of is that you can build, it is a valid proposition to build a product today as long as you have at least one user. And that no matter who you are and what you've done in the past and what your experience is, you can be the primary driver and builder of that product. And we're gonna see why. So let's dive in. Okay, so back when I had started writing code, this is way too long ago, but let's say between 10 and 15 years, I spent the bulk of that time writing Ruby on Rails code. And one of the things that Rails gives us is convention over configuration. That's just one of its built-in mantras. And so there's generally a specific way of getting work done when Rails is the framework that you're working with. And what I found, at least over several years of working with Rails, that there were certain opinions and decisions that I needed to make. There were certain opinions and decisions that I needed to make, and that as I found myself making those decisions in a repeatable way, I then built additional personal conventions on top of the Rails conventions. And I did that so much that I got to this point where I could just pump out projects super fast. In fact, one of my favorite projects to talk about is this one. It was like a silly little SSH config manager, but I called it Venti because I started with this challenge of, I want to see if I can build this thing in an hour. And I built it in 20 minutes. And within an hour, everything was done and deployed to production. And if you know Rails, usually that deployment process it takes a while. But I've built many things over the years. And the point is, in these years, I was trying to learn a lot, but I had these conventions set up and I had tooling that I had built around it. And it just made a lot of sense for me to build these products. Now, if I was trying to build these things for a larger organization, that maybe would have been a different story, but it was not unusual. I was working for agencies at that time, and it was just not unusual for us to build our own software because we could do it so quickly with minimal moving parts. Now, one of the challenges there is that while it was easy to build, it was really, really, really difficult to maintain because there's always something moving in production. And so even though it's nice and consolidated, it's like a living, breathing thing, and it needed to be cared for more than files that could largely just be static. And so what happened for me about 9 years ago or so is what we realized with the agency that I was working with at that time, that most of what we were doing was content that could have been pre-rendered. It was mostly static. So we had all of this custom engineering that was building in caching mechanisms to make static content work faster. But we also had a few clients where we were just using static site generators, and we were like, this is kind of amazing. Why don't we just do this? And that was around the time that the Jamstack was in its early days, and it just made a lot of sense. And so it was so much easier to maintain, build pipelines, deployment pipelines, like it just super, super simple. But it made the building far more complex. And when we had more complex cases that we needed to solve, we needed to stitch all of these services together, build times bloated. And when we were trying to serve enterprise applications, it just got really, really complicated. And so I felt this shift in this era where at first I was still building and maintaining my own Rails applications, but as I stopped doing as much Rails work during the day for the agency and started moving more towards this Jamstack, JavaScript based stacks, I was further away from Rails and tired of maintaining Rails applications in production. But it didn't it made me want to build JavaScript based applications for personal use. And I tried a few times and it was just not feasible. It's stitching too many things together. So one of these apps that I had on the earlier slide was to serve this goofy thing that happens to me where I very frequently wake up with a song stuck in my head. And for many years, I've wanted to just record that data. And so I created this app in Rails that it was awesome. It was awesome. I would just type the song in. It would search one of the databases, pull in the content, pull in the album image. And what I did was in this era, when I got tired of maintaining that original application, is I created a page on Notion. And this is the same era where just buying in general became more preferable to building. I had built several proprietary and or bespoke custom content management systems, and we just stopped. Built them for agencies, built them for clients, built them for myself, and I'd stopped because it didn't make sense. It was too hard. It was just too hard to build, and to maintain the code itself. It made more sense to buy. Now let's fast forward. There's a lot of stuff happened. Push that complexity further. And little did we know, AI was on the horizon. And so a couple of years ago, AI lands. We see tools like Bolt, Lovable enter the scene. And the mantra around that time is not convention over configuration. It's anybody can do anything. Anybody can build anything. It doesn't matter. Now, at this time, I thought that was really interesting. Actually, I didn't think it was interesting. I was pissed off all the time. I think it's really interesting now. Because when I came at it from the developer standpoint, I took the posture that a lot of developers did, which was, yeah, you can build anything you want as long as you're totally fine with that thing being a total piece of crap, because it is. And if you come at it from the other end and you have no developer experience, you think, holy smokes, I can just bring an idea to the web and it works. It's incredible. It's incredible. I don't have to pay $30,000 for my website anymore. Actually, you might. If you were, you probably still do. That's for different reasons. So that was really powerful. But during this era, I found myself still kind of balancing I was trying to find patterns with AI coding applications and agents, but I was also writing most of the code because it would get stuck. But one of the really cool things on the other end of that spectrum is that my 7-year-old daughter built a full stack application. I probably helped her, I don't know, if we say somewhere between, I did maybe 5 to 15% of the work, but she did the majority of it. I mean, just using dictation. She came home from trick-or-treating and a couple of days later had sorted all of her candy, graphed on paper, and we were like, let's make a website out of this. And she did, and there is no way whatsoever that I would have been able to do this when I was 7 years old with the tools that were available at the time. So it was incredible that she was able to do this with the tools that are at her disposal. And I wrote up about this and got a lot of great conversations out of it because it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And then during this during this period when we're all kind of tinkering and developers really frustrated with what AI can do, the LLMs get better. So new models hit the scenes. Developers are figuring out new patterns. And it's slow, slow, slow. And then one day it starts to feel like, hey, maybe I can actually really start to rely on these LLMs to write code for me. So they got better. And around that time, so now we're talking, I would say for me, this was probably, my big inflection point was probably October of 2025, was when I was like, you know what? All right, I'm in, let's go. Let's really, really figure this out. And I started building personal apps for the first time in 8 to 10 years or so. And it was liberating, and it was so cool to be able to obsess over the UI, but also not spend 4 hours debugging one line of CSS at the same time. I mean, it was really, really cool. And so I built, one of the first apps I built was this one called Botanicard. I'm a plant nerd. I want to become a better gardener and a better plant dad. And so the idea with this was eventually that I would use the data. Basically, I would collect data. So I would try to work with these plants, try to grow plants, try to maintain plants, and regularly take photos, write updates. And then when we get to next season, or whenever something changes or I want to try something new, I've got all this data. I can run that against some LLM and figure out what went wrong. And so it's been amazing. And around this time, I'm tinkering with this, and it's so clunky that what I started to realize was that the UI, maybe we'll say it this way, the app really has served two different purposes. And I know we know about the back end and the front end, right? But that's not what I mean. I don't mean the back end and the front end. I mean that the actual front end, the UI, has served two different purposes. And I think we've kind of smashed those together. We've sort of used it as the distinction between, is this a static site and is this a dynamic web application? There's output and there's input, right? There's reading and there's writing. And when you're building a web application, you're kind of like, well, I've got dynamic data, so I need the way to write into the database, and then I need the way to consume it. I think I want to go to a world where there is no writing, because when you really think about it, the UI is really just a mechanism to create some sort of structure and shape for data to get into the database through the medium of your keyboard or your voice if you're using something like Whisperflow. And yet at the same time, the UI also gives you visual information back, which is often the fastest and most appealing way to consume that data. And so for me, what I look at those things and I think, okay, the input side of the UI, the writing portion of it, is completely unnecessary. But the app, what is the app? The app is I say it's just a database, but I think it's more than that. I think that the app is a way to move data around and then to visualize that. So I'm not one of those people who say the UI is going away. The UI is dead. I do not think UIs are dead. I think that visuals are important and they're always going to be important. It's why we started with hieroglyphics before we started with written characters. It's because pictures and there's just different ways to visualize information that our brains can comprehend faster than we can a bunch of characters or listening to people talk. It's just slower. And so I think that UI is going to remain, but the input UI just doesn't need to be there. It doesn't need to be that limiting. And so what I did was I went and I built an MCP server and attached it to Botanicard, because I was already kind of walking around the garden, taking photos and then sending them to Claude and being like, what have I messed up here? And then, I don't know, exporting that as a spreadsheet and then importing that spreadsheet into the database. And it was just like, this feels weird. Why? I'm already interacting with Claude to learn. why not just have that be the writing mechanism, and my app is over here collecting the data? And there's reasons. Obviously there are many other solutions for this, and there are reasons why I wouldn't stay fully coupled to Claude for this particular thing, and that I want the data in the place in the format that I want the data in. We won't go into that detail here. So I built a skill. I built an MCP server on top of Botanicard. I built a skill in Claude, and now I go around the garden. I take photos. I drop them into Claude, and I'm like, take a look at these. Tell me what you see. Let's update the database. And I've taken this further. You know, the earworms has evolved as well. And now this is becoming part of this whole personal agent suite that I have built. It's a conglomeration of different agent systems that are all working independently. And eventually I'm going to have this probably custom personal agent like a Hermes or OpenClaw that sort of ties it all together, but it's just built to be specific to me. And maybe it's something I productize in the future, but right now, now I open up this desktop app and I'm like, this is the song that's in my head. And it's so much faster because what I was doing before in Notion is like new Notion page. Okay. Now I'm going to open up Spotify, find the song. Okay. Write the song title exactly as it is so that it's the same as if it, in case it's happened multiple times, I can have good data on it someday. Make sure the artist name is right. Copy the Spotify embed code. Then inspect the iframe source. Go find the part of the iframe source that is pointing to the album art. Follow that URL to the album art, download the album art, upload the album art to the Notion page, and then I've got my recorded earworm. Now I just say, here's the song, go find it. Or sometimes even better, here are the lyrics stuck in my head. Can you find the song? I'm not sure I know which one it is. And it works. It's amazing. It's amazing. So I've got a number of these types of projects going on. And even since I've written this a couple of days ago, I'm getting kind of a new shape of, I'm finding that there are essentially going to be 3 core products or layers of my personal architecture system from which I can build all of these other kind of smaller tools that do various things. That I'm sure will evolve quite a bit here soon. But the point in all of this is that I am back. I have built so many applications over the last 6 to 8 months. And the reason for that is because now it's justifiable again. The thing you need to justify a product being built is an audience of 1. You. That's all you need. If you are going to use it, it's worth buying it. And that extends to the workplace as well. And that's what I started to understand recently, is that it's not just about you, the audience of 1 being you, but that 1 can be one thing. It could be one organization, it could be one team. But as long as you have that one thing, it makes sense because it's so fast to build this stuff today. And that's what we're doing at Netlify. So one of the projects I'm running is an inventory and a management system around all of our internal apps that we're building. But our people team is probably building more apps internally than anybody else is. We've got folks that are replacing software, replacing paid software. I mean, 5, 6, 7 figures. Like, we are replacing so much. We're building our external campaigns. I mean, it's the marketing team is, for a large part, they can dream up a campaign and then they can just build the campaign. It's amazing what we've been able to do. And I want to switch over here for a second and talk a little bit about why that is. And this is something that I had not baked into the presentation, but have drawn since then. And so, I mean, on the surface, it kind of looks like this, right? It was really expensive to build. And it was actually less expensive to buy for a long time. Now, for the most part, it's cheaper to build. You have to balance and consider maintenance, time, and resourcing. It does still take human time, and it does still take cost, but that cost is way more low level and often usage based compared to, you get these enterprise contracts from some content service or something like that. And you're like, where's it coming from? Right. And I'm thinking about a lot recently, why did that change? And yeah, the cost in AI is a big part of it. But I think it's not just that. I really don't. I think that a big part of this is also that just look at how products get built, right? So if these three bigger circles around the outside are three independent organizations. All right. So what do they have? Well, they all have their own unique problems. So if this is their problem space, for example, what is the product going to solve? Well, it's going to stay focused in this middle portion, this part that overlaps at least multiple customers in some way. But that leaves often this whole big piece out here where you have, if you are going to solve those problems with this really expensive software you bought, then you need to figure out a workaround. And so you're spending a lot of money and you're working around the product that you're spending a lot of money on. Now, you can justify building it because you can do it fast, but now when you build your app, all of those points in your circle are what you can solve because you are in full control of what you build. We're seeing this all over the place. Now, this is an article that came out a few months ago, and it made the news really more for the security issues that arose. But I like talking about that construction industries, but because it's anything like that. Some small business, they start to grow, and they've been managing their whole business from spreadsheets or something like that, and then the business grows and it's like, okay, well, we feel like we've outgrown spreadsheets, but why the hell would we pay $1 million for a piece of software that does 100 times what we actually need it to do? You don't need to do that anymore. You don't. You can just go you can just go build these internal tools. And there were just so many points of challenge before where it took months of build versus buy analysis to say, is this worth it or not? And then if you determined it was worth it, it might take years to bring that thing online. And if in those years or months or whatever it may be, some of your leaders leave that were driving that project, you think that's going to survive? It's usually not. And then if against all odds, you make it to the end and you're ready to launch it, you then still have to get people to buy into using it, and you've got to enforce that, and you've got to be ready to maintain it and make it better. And it's been so challenging. And now you don't have to spend all that time. You can prototype something in an afternoon. You just pick a feature, right? Pick a feature, prototype it. Cool. Get the sign off, build that feature in a month, start using that feature for that thing, tie it to your other system, do the strangler fig thing, and you eventually get yourself, pull one feature over at a time, and you end up in production with this really powerful application. I focus. I guess my hour is up. But then with the way we're building today, we don't need any sort of consuming syntax. We don't need a custom SDK, because if you have other services, you can just tie them together and you can build MCP servers so that your data can be adjusted with the tools and the agents that people across your organization are already using. So we're at this point. We're past the inflection point where you should be building your own software to solve your own problems. Now you can be building your company's internal software to solve your company's unique problems. You can start replacing your 5, 6, 7-figure software that you're buying with one or a few people that you put on to bring this thing to life and to manage it over time. And it doesn't have to be strictly your software engineering department. Anybody can do it. You want to partner with somebody who's technical to make sure it's secure and everything, but you can bring that thing to life. You can at least prototype it to get the conversation started internally. Because at the end of the day, only you know your problem space and your company and your team's problem spaces. And we're just at this point now where there is no reason, or there are fewer reasons, I should say, fewer valid reasons to rely on somebody's generic solution to a bunch of overlapping problems than it is to build your solution to your specific problem. All right, I went a little bit over. I wanted to cover some of those details and side tangents, but that's it. I'm going to sign off for today. My name's Sean C. Davis. I hope you all enjoyed this. Let's chat in the comments, and I'll see you next time.